what's coming over me. Did my head get lost in a memory? Every time I'm my own worst enemy. Feel my whole body heightening. Now your eyes on me, yeah, you're wired in. Buckle up, cause the night gonna ride it. Get close, don't know what you've been told, but it's all mirrors and smoke. We should lose control. Just leave all that pressure, get free. I got all that you need. Can you get on my feet? Push the tempo. Push the tempo, push the tempo. Push the tempo, push the tempo. Don't know what's coming over me. Did my head get lost in a memory? Every time I'm my own worst enemy. Feel the low end rebound ricochet off the walls to your chest, feel it penetrate as it runs right through every vertebrae. So pick up the pace, so you can't be clutching onto the brace. Better keep it running. I'm on a wave, baby. Are you coming? Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Get close. Don't know what you've been told. It's all mirrors and smoke. We should lose control. Just leave all that pressure, get free. I got all that you need. Can you get on my speed? Push the tempo. Push the tempo, push the tempo.
Oh, okay.
Look at how far we've come. We're not getting any younger. I don't know how to feel, but I know I'm not on my own. 'Cause together we are stronger. Now we are at different stages, and we can feel it going through changes. Everybody has to face it. I can't do this alone. 'Cause we can stand together. We won't crumble under pressure. Make these moments last forever. 'Cause we're indestructible. We can stand together. I'll be here for you whenever you need someone to remember that you're indestructible.
I got you, Cam, if you can hear me. I see you.
Cool. Sounds good.
Woo, boy.
The memories.
Yo, what's up, everybody in the chat? I think you can hear me. I hope you can hear me. We're about to start the show. About to get it in for all the wonderful people who are checking us out on X and YouTube and Twitch. Shout out to all of you at home. Got a lot of goodness to talk about. The fam Cam Hawkins is going to be rocking with us tonight, sharing some dopeness from the games that he's been playing, Dragon Age HD, and a bunch of other stuff. And then we're going to talk about people who are liars, straight up lying on the internet. So we got a jam-packed show. Thanks everybody for rocking and hanging out. And we're about to get it in a couple of seconds. So thanks everybody for rocking and for hanging. Word.
Yeah, I think about you all the time. the time. When I'm wide awake, I think that I'm dreaming. I don't smoke, but you get me high. You fill me up on the inside. You keep me up all through the night. When I'm wide awake, I think that I'm dreaming. Something about the feeling of you in my head. I can't quite believe it, but we're here again. Sometimes I try to breathe in, can't catch my breath.
Yo, it is time for Spawn on Me. It is time to get it in. Thank you everybody again for rocking and coming through and chilling with us. And it's time to do a podcast. Let's go.
Spawn on Me is the premier podcast spotlighting people of color. Every week, we talk news, what we've been playing, and tell you who's invited to the cookout. Our show is all about talking about gaming through a prism of blackness because we are the culture. Welcome to Bukkake, y'all.
Yo, what up, everybody? This is the Spawn on Me podcast with Khalif Adams. I'm your host, Khalif Adams. This is episode 529 of the Spawn on Me podcast. And yo, I am very excited to be here rocking with you on this lovely Halloween. Shout out to everyone who is supporting, everyone who is celebrating, everyone who is getting their scare on and their ghoul on for this wonderful Halloween. It is one of my favorite holidays because I love horror movies. I love horror games. I love all the things that go bump in the night. And we have a couple of things that go bump in the night that we're going to talk about on this episode of the Spawn on Me podcast. I'm super excited to let you all know, and I hope that you checked out our preview of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I'm going to talk a little bit about that during the show today, but please go check that out. It is on our X page, on my X page at Khalif Adams. We're going to be putting that on YouTube very, very shortly, so you can get the version there if you haven't seen it. And it's on Spotify already. So if you didn't get a chance to check it out, on our Twitter page, go to the Spotify page. Go check us out on the show and go check out the content there because it is already up. It's already there. You can go check out that work there alongside some fantastic content from our fam, Cam Hawkins, who has done some really great work in the space already for us, getting some dope things in the mix. So we have a really dope jam-packed show. We have a fantastic bunch of conversations to dig into. But first, let's get into it and introduce our co-host for the show. It is the fam, Cam Hawkins. What up, fam? How you doing? How's things, Cam? How you doing? How you chilling, man? You chilling? I know you ran in here after walking Astra, your wonderful dog. How you holding up?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Just my roommates are preparing for all the trick-or-treaters, so we're just like making sure that she was all settled because dogs and people knocking on doors and stuff. So things are good.
Dope. Excited to have you rocking with us for this episode because I know you have some really great stuff to talk about with a couple of games you've been checking out and reviewing. If you want to start to dig into some of that stuff right off the bat, because then I think we're going to do it a little bit different this episode. Usually we start off with the 411 with the news of the day, but I wanted to give you a lot of time to talk through the games you've been playing and the stuff that you've been reviewing. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you rock and talk about, Dragon's Quest and a couple of other games you've been playing in the mix as well. So the floor is yours, man.
Yeah, so I have gotten to play the first about 8 hours, I would say, of Dragon Quest III HD2D remake. This is the third time I've gotten to get my hands on the game since the kind of previews for the game are starting to come out. And my thoughts have continued to just rise and rise and rise. I really think that this is a phenomenal game in the making. Can't say anything official yet, obviously. There's no reviews. This is not a review. This is a preview, to be clear here. But it continues to impress me just how much tender love and care has been put into this game that a lot of people will consider one of the most beloved JRPGs of the genre, and how it has able to make it feel modern but still have the traditional elements that make Dragon Quest what Dragon Quest is as a franchise to this day. And I just have enjoyed, I think, like, when I first, because I have played the Switch / mobile remakes of Dragon Quest 3 in the past, and I think when I played that, I didn't take a whole lot of time to kind of appreciate what this game tries to do with its world building and its storytelling, and its kind of the RPG mechanics of it all, which you know, Dragon Quest has always been seen as kind of like the godfather, the blueprint of the genre. And when I have been playing through this game, it's really made me think like, oh man, this recent game that came out is really taking advantage, or like basically doing their attempt at doing this system that was introduced in this game. And things like that make me really appreciate this game even more so, because I know a lot of people, like, depending on the person you ask, they'll say on what their favorite Dragon Quest game is. There are a few that people will say that like are pretty common, and 3 is one of them. 3 is one of the like 3 or 4 that people will give answers to. And I've really enjoyed my time exploring and seeing their takes on these kind of iconic locations or iconic dungeons, right? Like, one of the things I can talk about is probably one of the more iconic dungeons in this game is this pyramid that you go into to get a specific key item that'll help you during your journey. And it's definitely like the first part of the game where you really start to feel like the challenge of like the combat and like the game getting more difficult, and the puzzle aspects of what Dragon Quest can do with their dungeons, where like there'll be these like fall through spots that you can step on, and it'll put you underground, and then once you get underground, it's like, oh, you can't cast spells anymore. You have to escape this. Yeah, you have to escape this dungeon now, and you can't cast spells anymore. On top of that, the enemies are harder. Like you'll run into new enemies that aren't on the base floor of the pyramid that are harder to kill or deal more damage, and it really makes you it really like shows like, oh, this is different. It's kind of like the first like wow, like oh crap moment of gameplay in that game, where it's just like, oh, this game is more than just your average like dungeon crawler or adventure game. Like they have these aspects to really make the game feel that it's more than just like kind of checking off okay, go to this location and go to do this objective. Like there are these like walls that you have to overcome, whether it be like whether you decide, oh, I'm just gonna grind things out until I can just punch my way through this wall, or because there's in this game you only really have the hero as your like party member. You have other party members, but they're not like a part of the story. They're more or less like mercenaries for hire.
Interesting.
And they all have different classes. So for me, I have like the warrior, who's like straightforward, physical, hit things hard, and have a lot of health, kind of like the tank of the party. And then I have the priest, which is a healer, but can also do like some specific other offensive magics and buffs and debuffs. And then there's the mage, which is like the kind of hardcore offensive magic class. And so like when you get in that scenario, it's just like, oh, 2 of my party members now are basically useless. They can't heal. Like I can't be healed. They can't do the heavy magic dealing, and they don't hit hard because they're basically mages. Like they don't have that physical attack aspect. So again, it's either you grind until you can punch your way through this wall, or you can go back to the like kind of mercenary place and you can get new party members, and you have to level them up from 1, but it's like, oh, you can decide to use a different character because like you don't know what's going to come moving forward, assuming this is your first point in the game, and you're like, what if this happens again? What if I get to another place where there's spells that don't work, and then I have to replace characters again? It's like, so it gives you kind of wants you to test your critical thinking skills in a little, like, you know, it's not super extreme, but it does make you come across like, oh man, should I like go and switch out my mage for a, you know, the new monster wrangler class, which is like basically a physical only class, or like things like that add to the role playing element of the game. So
that's rad. I mean, as a person who has not played any of the series, does this feel like a game where I can jump in and feel confident and comfortable, like learning the systems that you just talked about? Does it feel like it kind of tells you those things in a way that is comprehensive, or does it really kind of just like throw you into the mix and let you kind of figure it out?
So I think when it comes to the general combat, the general like the party system of like hiring these different classes, you're going to learn pretty quickly like what these specific classes are and what they do. There are like, you do get a good chunk of tutorials, especially in the beginning of the game. So yeah, I don't think that's really going to be an issue for new players. Like, again, this is not a review, this is a preview, but like from everything that I've played so far of that first 8 hours, and just having played the original Dragon Quest 3, I think that this is an ideal first Dragon Quest game for anyone who's never played the series before. It is traditional, like, you know, it is a traditional JRPG. There's random encounters. There's no way of getting around that. There is like, you will hit walls where you need to grind. You will need to like take the time to level up your characters a bit. That is just kind of how the Dragon Quest experience, at least through my experience so far, has like always been. And I think that is like on purpose. I think that is it is a niche that a lot of people, you know, I think a lot of mainstream people have started to like be like, we don't like this. We want this to be, I don't want to say approachable, but we just don't want it to be as much of a time consumer, you know, respect time, and then respect like I don't even say difficulty, because I don't think it's a difficulty thing. I just think that there's just certain preferences that, you know, we've seen more people get into the JRPG genre, which is great. But I think the things that JRPGs are known for are the things that those people do not like in video games. And so it's started to cause some franchises to ease up on those aspects. I definitely think Atlas has done it in recent years with Persona 5 and Metaphor. Those games, like, you know, Atlas games used to be brutally hard. And I don't think that Dragon Quest is brutally hard. I just think that you just kind of have to recognize what this game is when you get to the kind of the minute to minute combat and gameplay experience. That is more or less what it's going to be throughout the game. But you will hit these moments that will be like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I think what Dragon Quest games do the best as a JRPG is give you that sense of adventure, give you the sense of like, I'm going on a journey, and I don't know where this journey is going to take me. And that is the stuff that I personally really like in JRPGs. Like, I love finishing a JRPG and being like, what a journey I just went on. Like, imagining where the little small innocent town I started in, to, you know, in some cases defeating God, but then in other cases it's like defeating this like evil. And I think that Dragon Quest 3 does a really great job so far in the first 8 hours, giving you that sense of like variety in the different locations you've gone to, the different things you've experienced. Like, there's, you know, without getting into specifics, but there's like a point where you go to a village that is that like fairies live in, right? And there's like this whole thing that you have to deal with the fairy village. And then there's, again, the pyramid, and then there's like this oasis town that's in the middle of a desert, and then there's like you'll run into like dwarves and like things like that make it's kind of like the interactions that you have throughout the game that build up the world as you're going along.
So it's doing the world building as you progress through it, right? So you're getting that flavor of, you know, where you, I like the way you talked about it in terms of like the grand journey, right? Where you're going and figuring out and finding all of these kind of nooks and crannies within the world that you can kind of like go find and then get more layers added to your story. As a person who has played the game already in its previous forms, does it feel like the remake is adding anything special to it besides kind of, you know, graphical updates and things like that? Does it feel like there's extra things that as a new player to this story and to this journey that you should like give you know, some kudos to the team for? What are some of those things?
So one of the things that I will mention is that which I think is cool. And if it continues to do what it does, what I think it's doing, once we get to like the review period, I will be able to like be more definitive with it. But what I like is that it does feel like more or less a 1-for-1 remake in the sense of like if you follow like certain if you follow like there are things that like there are like key locations where I remember finding like not even like a key item but just like a specific item that is like, oh, that's still there, like that's like it's found in the same place, which is cool. But then there are instances where that's not the case too, and so like it gives you that sense of like, oh, we want to stay true to this as much as we can, but there are some things that just naturally need to be reworked, but still give you that as closest to the original experience as possible in this modern form. But the other thing that I wanted to mention too is that I think that there is, how do I explain this? I think what's great about like the world is that it and in the game itself is that they make these towns feel the same but expanded upon. Like there's certain like even the beginning town it feels small, but it's still like much bigger in this modern view. And so there are certain locations where you have to walk like much further to like get to a castle, and it makes it feel grander, but it also gives you like this familiarity to everything that you've experienced if you've played the game previously.
I love that. I mean, that's the things that I hope for when it comes to kind of games that are being remade, right? Like Shadows of the Damned is a game that's just gotten a remaster that I'm excited to play. I haven't played that game in a very long time, but was a big fan of it. And I'm hoping that we see something different in the way that it now comes to this kind of newer audience, in the way that the Dead Space remake rejiggered everything to make that game feel different while also having a very true to the fandom experience that I think a lot of people really appreciated. And it sounds like you, as a person who is a big Dragon Quest fan, feels like they're doing that here as well, and that feels like that's a good thing to hear for folks who are thinking about jumping back into this series in this new way. Go ahead.
The last thing I want to mention too that I think is that I appreciate is that, because again, I like the kind of push and pull and difficulty in Dragon Quest, and one thing that I did notice is that they definitely tried to make you fight for like your rewards, like the big rewards in that game more, in the sense of like when you're at the pyramid, like, you know, in the original you would just get the key item that you're looking for as long as you made it to the end of the dungeon, and then you're out. In this one, there's a boss fight that you have, like a brand new boss fight, and things like that to make you like work for that key thing. And in Dragon Quest, a boss fight is a boss fight. Like you have like almost every boss fight you get into in a Dragon Quest game, you are probably, unless you're like following a guide and you are trying to like be on top of everything, if you're playing it naturally, you are likely going to lose your first time around. Like, and so I like that challenge. I like being challenged, but in a way that's not like insulting or like or too difficult. And the other thing that I wanted to mention too, back when you're asking like kind of like the differences and what they've added on to the remake, is I think that, and they've talked about this a little bit through the marketing that they've done, but they're focusing a lot, in my opinion, a lot more on the hero's father, Ortega, who is like this warrior that basically more or less went on the same journey as you're going through. And so when you get to key points, you were like basically being mentioned, you're like, they're mentioning like Ortega, like, oh, like this king, like, or like this guy that looks just like you came here a long time ago. And like, because you don't really know what happened to your dad throughout the journey. And they do, again, this is not in the preview, but they've mentioned it in like in the past, that there's going to be parts in the game that's going to focus more on Ortega, whether like I think through like flashbacks too. And so for me, I think that's exciting, because in the original, it did add to the world building and like the storytelling, but it also kind of felt like random. It's like, I feel like you're only mentioning this because he's your dad.
Okay.
But this time around, it's like from go, they're like, oh, you know, you're in the main hometown, and like the king's like, oh, your dad went on this journey. We don't know what happened to him. Like, and that was always the case, but like as the game has progressed, it feels more like necessary. It feels more included to what's going on as you're journeying throughout this world.
That's rad. I'm excited. I mean, like, as a person who, you know, again, the reason I love having you on the show is that I'm learning so much about this genre, and it's really dope to hear how excited and enthusiastic you are about this specific game too, because it has, like, I remember hearing you talk about this with someone else, but you were saying like the Dragon Age, I keep saying Dragon Age, Dragon's Quest RPG is so foundational to the entire genre. This makes me excited to kind of like finally jump in and mess around in that space and see what it feels like, and feel like, you know, I'm learning, you know, why everyone really is so excited about, you know, this genre in general, as someone who is still learning and coming to it in that bigger way. That's dope. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is, like, ultimately, like, I think why Dragon Age is so beloved is that it's
Dragon's Quest.
Dragon Quest.
I've been saying Dragon Age all show, and it's behind me, so it's whatever.
What Dragon Quest does that I think make people really fall in love with it and continue to fall in love with it is that, one, it is a traditional JRPG, and it doesn't stray from that.
Yeah.
And this is like a great opportunity for people to get a shot at playing the older Dragon Quest games, but still staying true to what those games are. And there's also this like there's this campiness about Dragon Quest. Part of it is added because of the Akira Toriyama art and stuff like that, but you'll go to towns and they'll have these very over exaggerated accents, and it's very like representative of different like regions of the real world. And so it's really cool to like kind of that kind of adds to the world building, like, oh, I'm on a different part of the world because they're talking like significantly different. And it's not even just like based off the accents, but it's also like based off of like the language that they use too, like the word choice and stuff. And so like those are the things that like make Dragon Quest kind of stand out as its own thing so many, you know, decades later. And so and again, just based off of like how this trilogy, because, you know, we're getting 1 and 2 is structured, I think that this is like the perfect time to get into Dragon Quest, you know, if you have never played them before.
That's fantastic. I love that. That's a perfect preview for Dragon's Quest 3 HD. Is that the proper
Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake.
Nah, screw that. You can't be having all of that, man. That's too much stuff, man. And you got me on the beginning part, and then you lost me at the end because I was like, oh, now you got these extra layers to it. I know that there was one other game that you were really excited about talking about on the show today, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't get to play it for very long, but I did get to check out Tetris Forever, which is the new Tetris game, and the developers, Digital Eclipse, they did 2 other games based on other franchises, or one was based off a specific game developer.
Yep.
And I don't remember what they are because
that's the Atari 50 stuff.
I think it was one was the Tempest, and then the other one was, I think, a different, just a specific game developer. Yeah. And it was outside of my expertise, so I was just like, all right, that's cool. And so I got to check that out, and I really enjoyed it. I think that people that are real Tetris sickos are going to really like this game, and how it's Tetris in many different forms, but also it is very educational on the history of Tetris. There's this whole kind of documentary timeline where it'll show off, this is what Tetris originally looked like back in Russia on its original hardware, and things like that. And then there's also the multiplayer where you can play, I think, up to 4 players. And there's also these they basically split the games into 4 different eras. So there's the original Tetris, the Game Boy era Tetris, the third one, which is kind of during the Game Boy Advance era, where it's just the bomb blocks, and then it's the modern era of Tetris. And so obviously they were clear, we weren't able to get every Tetris game in here because of Tetris licensing and things like that. So Tetris 99 is not in there. Tetris Effect is not in there. The Nintendo licensed Tetris isn't in there. But they did say, which I thought was really cool, is that with the Game Boy era Tetris, they basically studied that game frame by frame to try and replicate it as best as they could to the original. So I think that's really cool that it's clear that these are documentarians that really care about preserving the history and sharing the story of Tetris, which is arguably the most important game ever. So it was very cool. There are a bunch of different modes to be able to play the game, where you can go back to different eras. You start modern, then you go back to another era if you meet the right requirements. There's a lot of really cool stuff about it. It comes out soon. I believe it comes out November 12th, if I remember correctly.
Soon. It comes out very soon.
It's coming out soon, and November 12th. And I think that it's going to be really cool. I think people are really going to like it for what it is. And it's still even though it is a Tetris kind of celebration and history lesson, it's also introducing new mechanics that you're only going to find in Tetris Forever. So it still is going to feel like a Tetris game that everyone's going to want to check out.
Yeah, I love Digital Eclipse. Shout out to Mike Micah and his team. We at Spawnomy are big fans of Mike Micah, and he put us in one of his first games that he put out in iDarb and all that stuff way back in the day. And the games that you were referencing were Llama Soft, the Jeff Minter story, and Atari 50, which was another compendium of a bunch of kind of history telling moments within the Atari legacy, and then you'd be able to kind of talk to them and also talk to the game, and then also kind of play some of those games as well in that larger game. But also, I want to run down a couple of games that Digital Eclipse has done over the years, because you forget how good that this team is about, and how wide and vast their layers are. They made a game, or they made a documentary and a game of the making of Karateka, which, again, if you remember how seminal that game was to the fighting game genre. That was one of the first fighting games to have ever come out. They're doing the new Power Rangers game, that's coming out very, very soon. They did a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collection game over some time. They did a Space Jam, the new Legacy game that they did. I think that had LeBron in it. They did a Disney Classic game collection. They did one for Blizzard Arcade, Samurai Showdown, Neo Geo collection. They did this SNK 40th anniversary edition. They did the Street Fighter anniversary edition for the 30th year stuff. And they did stuff for Mega Man and all these other games. So like Digital Eclipse is a studio that continues to put out like really interesting titles that really do speak to the nostalgia of video game fans. And I think they have to get some love in the ways that they worked on a lot of different stuff. So massive shout out to Digital Eclipse. And now you got me excited to go back and play Tetris again, because I'm like, man, that sounded a lot of fun. And massive shout out to them. But maybe we can get Mike on the show. We haven't had Mike on the show in a very long time. It would be great to have him back on to come hang out and talk some goodness with us there. We're going to take a quick break because that was fantastic and Cam killed it. We're going to take a quick break to get some water. And on the back half of the show, we're going to talk about the news of the week. We're going to talk about a really interesting layer that Stephen Totilo talked about in terms of Ubisoft. We're going to also talk about Neon Koi and Firewalk Studios being closed by Sony. And then we're also going to talk about the biggest liar in games, and that's Mark Kern. We're going to talk about that right after this break. So we'll be right back after this. Take a 2-3 minute break. Go grab some water. Go wash your hands. Go wash your butt. We'll be right back after this.
Hey there, my name is Naomi, and you might know me from internet things like hosting for IGN. I'd like to introduce you to my new show, This Week in Gaming. It's 20 minutes, short and sweet, and every week I go through all the important gaming news that you need to know, and then we have folks on like Khalif Adams, who shows up quite often, talk about all the important news. And you get to listen to it wherever you get your podcast, so it's easy to find. Just look for This Week in Gaming and make sure to give it a follow. And every week, Monday at 9 p.m. Pacific time, you get a brand new episode. I hope you'll join me.
All right, chat, we're going to take a quick minute and a half break and grab some water, and then we'll be back with the show.
Sleep, being anyone but me. True, you have to dig real deep to reveal that masterpiece. So I can't lose no sleep, being anyone but me. Yeah, true, you have to dig real deep to reveal that masterpiece. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful humans, we're about to roll back into the show. Thank you, everybody, for coming through. If you are still on Twitter, please retweet the show out. If you're on Blue Sky, share it out on Blue Sky. Share it out on the places that you can. Want to definitely get more dope folks watching the show and all that goodness there. All right, beautiful humans, we are coming back. 3, 2, 1. The first story of the week is that Grums is a pathological liar. He has been a lying liar face for many, many years. and he has figured out that the lie and the grift has definitely come through for the paycheck, and that man is grinding his ass off, telling lies, telling sweet little lies all over the internet. And if you missed the conversation, so the larger discussion that we are going to talk about and then dig into that other layer is, so Dragon Age has come out. It's getting rave reviews. A lot of folks have been really excited about it, myself included. I'm finally playing it and getting my hands on and digging into the game myself. And, you know, the anti-woke mob has been ready to pounce on this game because they have said this game is woke trash and it has trans characters in it. And now we can't play it because it is the wokest game on the planet. And they have been trying to figure out ways to knock this game down a peg, while it's doing really well in terms of not only its numbers, but assuming it's doing probably fairly well in sales. A quick look at the Steam charts that everyone seems to take as gospel now for how games are doing. That game is not only really high on the wish list, but it's really high on both reviews and on potential purchases. So a couple days ago, previews started to come out, and there's a gentleman named Mr. Matty Plays. And Mr. Matty Plays wind up having this moment where he had done a preview, and one of the kind of tertiary stories around the conversation was who was getting review code versus who was not getting review code. And the prevailing thought through the kind of non-woke crowd was that people who had said that the game wasn't really good were not getting review codes after they had done previews. So Mr. Matty has done his review that has gone out. He wasn't necessarily super high on the game, but these stories started to come out about leaked footage before the review had come out. And they were like, well, you know, we don't know who this person is. It started to come from these random accounts that were supposedly friends of Mr. Matty. And people started to put two and two together because your character, Rook, in the game looked like, in the footage that these other people were sharing illegally outside of NDA and outside of review embargoes, looked a lot like Mr. Matty's character in his own game. So Mr. Matty then comes out and he's like, hey, I shared some footage with a friend of mine. That footage then somehow got into the hands of somebody else. And that footage then went up on the internet outside of NDA, outside of embargo, outside of all of that stuff. He's now, made a mea culpa and put that out on his Twitter page and was like, hey, here's what happened. If BioWare and EA don't want to work with me anymore, I totally understand it. It's reasonable. But all the racist stuff that was being said by that other account, I have no acknowledgement of that. I that's not a person that I know. It has nothing to do with me. So that other narrative of like people are not giving access, EA is not giving access and holding access from all these other people to try to dampen and make it feel like there's some nefarious things that are happening, started to get picked up by the Grum's crew and all the other grifters in the space. So we starts to see these stories start to come out and these missions and these messages come out on Twitter. And 24 hours ago or so, Mark Kern, aka Grums, shared this on their Twitter page. They shared this. Oh, this is not it. Oops, that's it. That's not it. That's another story. That's the other story. They shared this. Leak. BioWare and EA caught red-handed. Mr. Matty Plays agreement supposedly leaked. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was true. Return to form, a required phrase. Content creation guidelines for Dragon Age Veilguard leaked? If true, this confirms everything. There is so much more here. You cannot talk about the woke. This is access journalism at its peak. This is bull crap, and we have to tear the corrupt system all down. So you get that message. You get that as the salvo that is being thrown, saying that EA is up to their no good deeds again and doing nefarious things. So so he shares what supposedly is this leaked agreement that you would get, usually something that you get as a reviewer from PR and from the teams that work on it, that give you, here are the guidelines of stuff that you shouldn't show because you don't want spoilers. And here are the things that you kind of get in an agreement that most people, myself included, have gotten over years, right? So he posts this on Twitter, and I'm going to share it to you. And it might be a little bit hard to see if you're on the stream right now, and we're going to read some of it off if you're listening to the audio version. So first of all, he posts this picture of this supposed agreement that Maddie Plays had gotten. The first red flag is that in the upper left-hand corner, where it says EA/BioWare, you can see where the cursor is on the piece of paper, that on the document, supposed document, that is this leaked document that is supposed to be the, this is the red flag for everyone being able to see this thing. I'm going to read it because it's pretty small on screen, so I'll say it. This is what supposedly went out. Now, the thing that is really weird about this is I think Mr. Maddie Plays is a part of Colin Moriarty's Last Stand Media. So this is addressed to, supposedly, Last Stand Media, a trademark company of Colin Last Stand LLC, and Colin Moriarty, owner of Colin's Last Stand LLC, as is registered under Patreon business, blah, 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 blah. Hereby agree to this non-disclosure agreement with EA BioWare, a subdivision of EA or Electronic Arts, trademarks of EA, also known as Electronic Arts. Matthew Schroeder, aka Mr. Maddie Plays, concedes the following rules that apply to having signed this agreement as defined by Gary McKay, residing general manager of EA BioWare, a subdivision of EA Electronic Arts. Here's the second red flag. You have now mentioned Gary McKay, who I don't know currently is the residing general manager at BioWare. Cam, if you're in the back, can you look that up for me just to give me some guidance on that while I continue to read this? Now, again, this is supposed to be a legal document coming from EA and from BioWare as a part of the NDA process that is given to Matt as a reviewer. Number one, here are the stipulations. We wish to communicate through this product that people in the age group of 25 to 34 know that this will be a formal return to the expected output of EA BioWare as it is once known as BioWare Corp. The recipient of this review program will agree to mention that Dragon Age Veilguard sees a return to form at BioWare. That's point number one. Again, this is supposed to be in legalese. Legalese is what you get when you get an NDA or a document like this. This is not something that just gets randomly put into the world with no lawyers having seen this. Two, no one, and mind you, no one would ever say you have to say a phrase in your review. No one would ever say that. Two, EA is an equal opportunity employer who takes the values of its diverse employee base seriously. You also therefore agree not to instigate, berate, suggest, or mention that this game contains the following. This is where it gets real stupid. Male to female transgender characters, surgical scars, woke content, homoeroticism, racial positivity, and 5, DEI compliant features. Again, another huge red flag about why this is bull crap. Because no one would say you can't talk about the characters being transgender when there's already transgender characters in the game and in the series. Surgical stars, that's a part of the makeup of making your character. Woke content, you can't define that, so that wouldn't make sense for a legal department to put that in. Homoeroticism, who would say that? You already can romance whomever you want in this game. That also is stupid. Racial positivity, I don't know what that is. I don't know. I don't know. Wait.
I had to come in just to laugh on that.
I don't know what racial positivity is. Yo, them Negroes are great. I don't know. Man, those Latinos are really fun. What does that mean? What does racial positivity mean? And then DEI compliant features. What are those? What are DEI compliant features? Okay, last 2 points. And again, mind you, think of this in the terms of if you were looking at a legal document, Number 3, we suggest that you refrain from comparisons to games which in no functional practice had anything to do with the production of Dragon Age the Veilguard. This includes comparisons to 2018's PlayStation 4 title God of War or its sequels or spin-offs. EA or EA BioWare did not borrow features from titles not produced by the Dragon Age Veilguard team, and suggest that we would be considered a breach of trust of the parties, and we can be required to legally examine the validity of the claim of this format. Lastly, refrain from personal attacks against members of the EA or BioWare team. We advise you to follow our dictionary or blacklisted. We advise you to follow our dictionary of blacklisted. That's not a sentence. Which includes transphobic slurs, misgendering of one's pronouns assigned by truth of choice, or any mentions of anti-white or feminist sentiment. Intersectionality has been added to this dictionary as of 2024 and should also not be a part of this review. So we got to talk about the stupidity in that whole thing, right? Because first of all, there is no legal team on the planet that would phrase things in the ways that were phrased here. This is the dumbest ish I have seen in probably my 13 plus years of working in this industry. I have signed more NDAs than most human beings have signed. I have been through the legal process, looking at documents and looking at contracts more than a lot of the other if you're not in the gaming press, it's not a thing you usually do unless you're working in a field where you constantly have to deal with legal teams. This is the most I just chat GPT legalese kind of nonsense that I've seen in a very long time. The fact that he is this stupid to share this, and he says on his Twitter page that he found this on 4chan and then shared it, knowing that his audience is dumb enough to fall for this. It is criminal in the ways that he did this. And I said it on Twitter today. I hope Colin Moriarty, Last Stand Media, EA, I hope they sue the crap out of him. Because you know what? That to a certain extent is defamation. Or it's close to it. Because what you're trying to do is say, oh, Mr. Matty Plays agreed to signing this thing for a code, knowing that these things were included within the conversation of what you have to do to get a code from EA, which is trying to paint EA already in a bad light to be like, oh, they're doing nefarious things to help wokeness happen. And to say, again, I'm going to read a sentence from here. We suggest you refrain from comparisons to games which in no functional practice had anything to do with the production of Dragon Age the Veilguard. There is no lawyer. Lawyers are smart in the respect of they will find dope language to say exactly that. This is some old school, I don't know how to read, I don't know how to write. I've never actually been in a space where I understand legal language space to be able to write this and say it out loud. Here's the kicker. So that was up for 24 hours. And as of this recording, we're recording this on Thursday. He wrote this stuff on Wednesday. It's still on his Twitter page. After he has said, I posted this as a rumored leak, and it turns out it was false. Sometimes rumors don't pan out to be true. No crap. I'm leaving this up because it's already community noted, and it was. The community note said Colin Moriarty and Mr. Matty Plays did not sign an NDA that looked like that. And I'm not trying to hide a mistake. Thanks to my followers who helped track this down. You guys deserve better vetted information, and I'll be doing that much more in the future. Again, look at the billboard. I'm a liar. He is not going to vet any more information. He hasn't vetted any of the information that he's put out for most of the stuff that he has said online. And the fact that he is still garnering attention and getting people to believe him, when you can put out and find something like this, one of the things that is the most important part of this entire business and the entire work that we do as content creators and as, some people consider themselves to be journalists. I don't fully consider myself to do journalism, but I do work in a smart and more reasonable and truthful way, is you tie your name to what you put out publicly. You tie your being, your public persona to the things that you put out. If I were to do that, I would be immediately blacklisted from the video game industry. And it tells you that I would deserve it if they did. If they would have kicked me out and been like, yo, Ka, you just put out this random thing that you found on mother effing 4chan as information and have implied and implicated that not only EA is bad at what they do and are doing nefarious things, but these other creators who did something, again, I don't know if Mr. Matty Plays did something nefarious, but he got caught and he apologized for it. It is the wildest, dumbest thing I've seen in a very long time. Cam, I don't want to put you on the spot, and if you don't have anything to add to this, that's totally fine. But if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear it.
I mean, you've said most of it. It's one of those things where, yeah, there's like, it is so clear that this dude, or either in good faith from his point of view,
right,
that that he genuinely doesn't know what like those emails look like of getting a review, or getting a review opportunity,
right,
or he does know and he's just doing it all in bad faith and hoping that people will fall for it. And because with the type of person that he is and the way he acts online, I could see it either way. I could it's one of those things, like, maybe he genuinely doesn't know, but like, knowing his background as like a game dev and working in games, like, I feel like to a certain extent you could potentially know that, or you genuinely don't know, and you just thought that you just like saw something again on 4chan, didn't really review it in any way, in a real way. You just saw keywords that you thought that would, grab attention, and it was like, oh, this has to be real, and then it's just like, and then post it, and it's just like, that's not a thing. And like, this goes into a not remotely as disgusting and unprofessional or like topic, but it just feels like even people that like I like online, that I don't personally know, but like I like their stuff, where like they'll talk about reviews or review processes, and it's just clear that they don't know what they're talking about. And I don't think that, and I think that they are doing it in a way where like they genuinely think that this is how it works. They're not trying to do it to garner attention. And it's just like, and it's one of those things where in most cases, not someone like him, because he's just like Grums, because he's grown a like this notoriety of just being so terrible, like, but in most cases, like, just ask. Like, you literally just need to ask, like, hey, media person, what is it like getting a review like thing? And it's, you can just get an answer. You can just ask, and we're gonna tell you. We would tell you. Yeah. And so it's just one of those things where like, I wish that people didn't. It just really sucks that we're in a place where people feel like that games press is super gatekeepy, when we're really not. Like, y'all just don't ask. Y'all just come to conclusions on your own, and we're not going to waste our time talking to people who come to these conclusions that don't actually like do the work. It's not even work, but just like the simple steps to be like, hey, I know you work in media, because surely you these people follow some writers, some reviewers in some capacity, where they can be like, hey, what does this look like? Like, what is this? And that's the thing that's also crazy is that like there are people that are making these videos about this Dragon Age stuff that have reviewed games. It's like, y'all know this ain't true. Y'all have reviewed games before, and like it's also really crazy because like there's not, at least for me, speaking for myself, and I know you've done this a lot longer, but I've still done this for like 5 years now. I don't think I've ever had to sign like a signature on a legal document,
right?
NDA,
right,
to review a game.
No,
I've never had to do that. I do, like, you know, again, just a little kind of POV, I guess. Like, you normally get some sort of email detailing the embargo,
yep,
if there is one, the restrictions, which if there's any sort of restriction on what you actually cover in the review, it has to do with major story spoilers. That is it. They don't want you to do massive spoilers on specific stuff in the story. That is it.
Yeah.
There's no other like certain things that you cannot mention in this review. Like, I know that God of War 2018 was a game where, like, especially after playing the game, it was obvious that they were sent, like, you know, people who reviewed the game, they're like, you cannot talk about these things because these were such key moments in that game that made it so incredible for people when they experienced it on their own.
Right.
And so, like, those are the things that are mentioned in a, like, you know, accept these terms and then we'll send you a code, you know? And and so, like, for me, it's just, I really wish that people that felt like that there was this negative, like this negative aspect of like how games are reviewed, review scores, which is a whole nother topic that you know we can delve into later if we want to, reviews and like how like reviews are the restrictions and stuff. You just got to ask someone that's in the media, and you know they're not going to like send you a copy of an email they received, because that's actually a problem,
right?
But they'll tell you like the general specific, like, you know, the general like outline of what exactly what I just explained. It's like it's hardly ever anything more than that what I just explained. And so that's just how it is. And I just wish that the people would just like be willing to just talk to someone in the media and just believe them, because they have no reason to lie. Right. It's like the kind of this whole conversation that like people think that games journalists are like rich, and it's like, no, we're not. Like, no. You know, and so it's silly. It's silly.
And it goes back to a lot of the stuff that we've talked about over the years on this show, right? Where it's like you have a fairly large part of an audience that will assume about your work as opposed to ask. Then you can tell them the truth and they won't believe you. So then you stop telling people, you know, the reasons why things work the way they work because they don't already do it. I think the video game industry also does itself a disservice by not sharing a little bit more of the behind the curtains of how some of that stuff works, because again, we see people in the content creator space who often are misinformed, don't have actual information about how it works. And those are the very loud people in those conversations. Like you said, every embargo that I've had to deal with, or NDA, the most that you have to do is have a verbal confirmation that you'll deal with the embargo. They'd be like, hey, when is the embargo? Oh, the embargo is next month. If you want to play this game early, tell me that you'll abide to that embargo, and you won't say anything if you give you the code to go do that embargo. That is not payment for work. Even when you do send cool gifts and stuff like that, like little trinkets and stuff. Like, look, I got that influencer thing from Dragon Age. I wouldn't have influenced my review, because I've been doing this long enough that it's not cool enough. And most of the stuff that you get as an influencer / reviewer / content creator isn't expensive enough to be worth the amount of money that you would wind up getting if someone were to pay you for an actual review. I know, like, I know how much I get paid for a speaking engagement. most companies on PR aren't paying me that money for me to do a review, right? And if you did pay for a review, that automatically puts you in trouble with the FTC because you have paid now for, and we've just seen that those laws have gotten stricter about paid reviews. You absolutely can't do a paid review now. You have to do that on the super sneak tip to be able to do something like that. You were going to say something, Cam.
Well, first off, yeah, like, and that's another thing. It's just like people think that journalists get paid to give good reviews. That doesn't happen. I've never been offered money. I would never accept money. It does not happen. It just doesn't. And so it like people will reach out to creators to do like a sponsored post about a game and talk highly about a game.
Yes.
That's different. But, and also like when you're talking about the whole getting the Dragon Age gift, right? Like I got that, you know, I talked about how I got that Final Fantasy gift from Square Enix for, you know, and I reviewed Rebirth earlier this year. I didn't know I was going to get that like 6 months later. Like it was just, it came out of the blue and it's just like, hey, here's this, you know, you want this package? It's just like, yeah, sure. And, but like, it doesn't change the way I feel about the game anymore. Like it's just like, okay, it's cool that you sent me this. And like, obviously they want to send it to us as like, you know, part of it as a token appreciation. And like, you know, that's just what it is. That's just how it is. But also it's like, hey, we want you, like, you know, you can make a post about this, or we hope that you make a post about this.
Right.
And then it helps promote the game. Like, okay.
And I get the fact that people who are like, that crosses the line between you being a journalist and being a part of the marketing part of that conversation.
Sure.
But no one says that to anyone on YouTube. That's not a thing that people tell them, right? Either you believe those people or you don't at this point. So if people want to get mad at the fact that you got a cool gift out of, you know, you being an influencer or a person who does work in the video game space, and they're like, oh, well, that means that your bias is towards that company, or you were giving them favorable coverage. I've not given favorable coverage because I've gotten a gift. It's never been that thing. I've been flown places and still been like, yo, that wasn't that great.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe that feels bad for them because they maybe feel like they wasted money on me. But the thing that I've heard across every person in PR since I've been in this space is that you giving a review or giving favorable coverage because you got something actually is a disservice to the makers of that game. And it's a disservice to your audience, and it's a disservice to the work, because then you have then said publicly that you are for hire and you're for pay. And that's not the way that works, because again, most of the people who are in this work, who have been doing this work, your reputation is what puts you in a good spot to be able to do more cool stuff. If people look at your work and they're like, yo, that Cam is really smart. He understands this genre in a way that a lot of people don't. And he's willing to be honest about it. That gets you way more space to do more cool stuff and gives you more opportunities to review more stuff, because you're actually giving value to the space. You're giving value to the developer. You're giving value to the publisher, because you said the thing that they were hoping they put out a good product. And you were like, oh, that game was good. Or, oh, you know, when we send feedback to companies, you know, after preview sometimes, like we'll tell them some stuff to be like, hey, this thing that was in the game that's not working really well, you might want to look at that again. And usually the answer is, we already understand that thing isn't working well. In the, you know, there's probably a first day patch for that, or here's some other stuff that you might be able to check out, you know, in the time that we're getting those things fixed. You're like, you know, hold off a minute, you know, or if they do say don't talk about that in the review, it's because it is code that is not final, right? So they know that there are bugs in that code, that there are things that aren't working and things that are in that space that they don't want to necessarily be the thing that influences the full picture. But if you mention it, it's a reasonable mention, right? Yeah. And that happens usually in your full review at the end of that process. It doesn't happen in previews, because preview stuff is not usually full code. So again, going back to that last point, because this dovetails into the next story, is no one in their right mind should be following Mark Kern. No one who is paying attention to the way that video games are actually made from a developer who has done nothing in a decade. I have done more work in a decade than Grumps has done. Most of the people who you see right now who are in the video game space have done more work than Grumps has done in the past decade. He is not making a game anymore. He's trying to make a game and failing at it. He's continuing to spin up all these other people who help to make all this misinformation and makes the industry stupider and makes the gaming community dumber by sharing out information that isn't real and ginning up all of this outrage about things that don't matter, like racial positivity and DEI compliant features. Someone clip that for me, because that is the dumbest crap I've heard in forever.
Dude must be thinking that there's like scenes in that game where like a person of color walks into the room and everyone just stops what they're doing and starts like just for existing. Like that is like what I feel like you like what I don't know. Just thank you for existing, person of color.
Thank you, Negro, for walking into frame. Thank you. Yeah, thank you to all. It's like what game would you put racial positivity in? And again, hey, everyone who is okay, this is your homework, chat. This is your homework, internet. I want you to tell me two things. I want you to tell me a game that has racial positivity in it, and what did that racial positivity look like? Please send that to spawnomepodcast@gmail.com or go to speakpipe.com/spawnomme and tell me what that looks like in what game, and we will play that in an upcoming episode of Spawn on Me. Because DEI compliant features, they're like, oh, you have a broad nose. You have blue hair, which is stuff that they feel is DEI. Or again, racial positivity. And you're supposed to say, therefore, you're supposed to not instigate, berate, suggest, or mention that this game contains the following. So they are saying, whoever wrote this is saying all these things are in this game. Mind you, the person who wrote that didn't play the game yet because it just came out. Literally came out today. And they are saying this game has male to female transgender characters, surgical stars, woke content, homoeroticism, racial positivity, and DEI compliant features. These are from people who are bigots. Let's say the thing out loud. The people who write stuff like this are bigots. They're racists. They're homophobes. They're transphobes. These are the people who really don't understand how the real world works and are trying to influence the circles that they have about dumb-ish. So that translates into, what's up, Stu Jersey? Shout out to you for joining the chat. That dovetails into another story that I do want to dig into, because there was a really good tweet that Stephen Totilo put out for his newsletter. And I think it was probably the more important part of these conversations that have come up over the past couple of weeks. So Stephen Totilo put out this piece. There was a Ubisoft stakeholder meeting, quarterly meeting, and one of the parts that was discussed here was, and this is paraphrasing, and I'm going to read it what Stephen Totilo said. Shout out to Stephen Totilo, who needs to come on the show. We need to get him on. Company again hints that the anti-woke attacks on its games have hurt sales. Executive committee has talking about actions aimed at tackling the dynamics behind the polarized comments around Ubisoft so as to protect the group's reputation and maximize our game's sales potential. So this is important. And I think the reason why this is important is because one of the things that we have seen, and again, this goes back and dovetails around to what the BS that Grums and all these grifters are doing, is their whole thing is that they want to defund the gaming industry. They want to make it so that games that supposedly have racial positivity and DEI compliant features are no longer made in the space because they're either really bad, they don't want them, or they put politics into their games in a way that doesn't feel reasonable or feels shoehorned in, right? What stands out to me in this conversation is the fact that now some of that is trickling upward in a way that I believe is a slippery slope. And the reason I say that is because we currently have an industry in which we as an industry are very afraid of talking back to the audience, because those are the folks who pay for the games that we make. Those are the people who, to a certain extent, are, providing us a livelihood through the work that we do as people who work in the video game industry, through the games that they purchase, right? By saying this out loud, this adds a potential layer of validity to a thing that we don't have any metrics on. And that's dangerous, because what it winds up doing is it signals out to the people who are like Mark Kern that all of these ginned up ideas and all of these things are affecting sales in a way that is actually causing problems for games that are coming out. Now, mind you, it's a hard thing to talk about because, one, no one is taking metrics on wokeness. No one is doing the number crunching on what games are woke, what games are politically charged in a way that feels untainable or unsustainable to folks in this circle. 3, no one is counting these circles of people because they are they're lumped in with all gamers, right? It's not like if you went to the anti-woke space and was like, yo, let's take a survey of all of you so we can figure out what damage you're doing to the space. So this then changes the conversation in a much broader way, because now companies like Ubisoft are potentially thinking about the impact that is happening to them around an issue that doesn't exist. And I think that's the problem here, is if you start to give credence and you give way and you give the microphone and say the messaging that you have shared externally has any weight, then you give that group power. And that's not a thing that we want to do, because what are you giving them power to do? To boycott your game, to boycott your studio, to be happy about it when studios close, and to then harass developers and harass studios, knowing that they will potentially gain some leverage in a space where we shouldn't be giving them leverage. So I think this was a moment that popped up this week that I think is really important to look at. And I think it's really important for the industry to take a moment and think about the ways that we signal out about how games are doing. And look, if this is a thing that's actually happening, there's a discussion to be had about what does that mean, right? Because then it goes back to the conversation of, are we going to stick to our standards about what's happening here? Are we going to stick to the conversation in a much larger way and discuss the gaming industry in a way that needs to be talked about? What happens when games don't do well? And what does that mean for the industry? And how do we talk about that? How do we also then pull in metrics, right, that make a lot of sense to be able to discuss the way games are working and the games that are not working? Because if you wanted to make it sound like Concord was killed off because of wokeness, you could, right? And I'm sure that there's a part of that discussion that's in that mix. But I also think the larger conversation about that was that game just didn't find the audience that it hoped to find. Maybe it came a little bit late, right? So we have to do a good job of boxing those people out in the ways that we need to not only keep the people who are in that space, safe from the bad actors in these spaces, but also we can't give ground by allowing bad faith arguments to make us have to maneuver in a different way. I think that's a bad practice. And it was really good that Stephen Totillo brought this up, because we have Assassin's Creed, what is it? Samurai game, right? Shadows coming out very soon. There's already been a backlash against it and all this other kind of stuff that's been in that mix. So what does that actually mean? Cam, I want to hear your thoughts about, some of the kind of layers of this, if you have any thoughts.
I mean, I think you covered it pretty succinctly that there's just like, even if hypothetically like that is something that is happening, there's no way to really quantify it in a way that in a real way.
Right.
And on top of that, like, kind of what you said, like, if y'all kind of just let that, if that is your running bit to make these decisions, you are validating these people who are majorly in bad faith, making bad faith arguments that have little to no actual, evidence or pushing power on what is actually happening in games, because it's just like not true. Because especially, and there's just like there can be this whole discussion alone on like DEI not being simply like, when people think DEI, they immediately and solely think of race, and it's just like DEI is a much more intricate term than just race or gender or sexual orientation. Like, DEI is just like, it's like diversity in every sense of the word. It's not just about these kind of key points that people that are against DEI or wokeness or whatever like to use as talking points. And so it's one of those things where I think that Ubisoft has been one of the better major game developers about being diverse in ways, and like, because I think it's just there's never been like until like Shadows happened, right? There was really no real discussion about the way that Ubisoft has been making their portfolio of characters and just games more diverse. But once a black man's on a cover, that's when things
racial positivity, baby.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where and like, and let's be clear, when Watch Dogs 2 came out and we saw like a black man in a like where people could argue that he was playing like as a criminal type person, it was awfully quiet. But when he's like the black black character as the protagonist, the hero, things like that, it's like, oh, this is a problem. Oh, and my other option is a woman. Like, it's just so silly and stupid when like especially in a series like Assassin's Creed, where like the history like backs it all up. It just like, it doesn't, they have like nothing to really with substance that argues against these choices. And so yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I hope that it doesn't really change what Ubisoft has been doing, because like I think Ubisoft has released some pretty great games recently, and like Prince of Persia Lost Crown is like a beloved game this year, and from what we saw at Assassin's Creed Shadows, looks really promising. And like, I know some people weren't crazy about Star Wars Outlaws, but that still looks like a fun game that I would like to try and give it a shot. But yeah, I think that Ubisoft has been good about doing what they've been doing, and I don't think what these executive committees want to do is going to change anything.
Yeah, and thank you for the thoughts. I think the thing that I'll end on with that part of the conversation is, again, the folks, and again, I don't want this to sound like a nose in the air kind of statement, because it's not. But I do want the audience, and it goes back to what you said, Cam, which is like, there are tons of folks who you can ask who actually have knowledge about the process of game making and the process of how we get to the characters that we get to, and how do we get to the space to be able to do the work that we wind up all doing. As a person who's been working in the video game industry for at least, 7 years, worked at Riot, worked at Firewalk, worked at, a couple other places, Intel, all these other places, there's a vast amount of knowledge that even me as a small person in the industry can share with an audience. And that's what I try to do here on Spawn on Me. But the thing that always winds up happening is you get these people who decide that there's something nefarious happening. And none of those things make any sense. But we're giving it credence by saying, well, maybe this is a thing that's happening and this is the cause and effect of what that might be. Instead of saying, we are the subject matter experts here. We have been making games. We are the people who have been here, who have been doing that work. We are the folks who are in those conversations discussing how these characters are going to be made and why those characters are going to be made and what purpose they have within those titles. But we consider the other side of those discussions and make it feel like those are actually smart discussions to be having when they're not. There are tons of things to be able to talk about in the terms of Ubisoft and some of the decisions that they've made that have not been great, that have kind of done some damage to some of the IP and the games that they've made. There's a ton of actual conversation there to be had. But people want to focus on there's a black dude on the cover and there's a woman on the cover. And what is their response and what is the thing that they do to flip it? Just put a dude in it. Just put a dude in it. And that will fix everything that's wrong with these specific games. Take out the blue hair, change the chin on these characters, and that fixes it all. It is one of the dumbest things that we've done, and we continue to give those folks in those spaces a platform, not in the ways that, sharing dumbness online, because I have a whole other conversation around that. But when we don't, as a industry, say, this has no validity, this makes no sense, and this is a dumb thing that you're saying, we then give the space to the other people to run the narrative. And that's where we mess it up every single time. Every single time. We give the space to the weirdest and the wackiest people with the biggest tinfoil hats and say, you get to make the narrative about the space that we have been working in for more time than you've been playing. And that's a dangerous thing that we wind up doing. Shout out to Greg Hazy in the chat. He says, Research 101, correlation is not causality. That's a trap too many fall into when it comes to discourse. 1,000%. Shout out to Factotum, TTV. Shout out to my fam. That's my carry right there in predecessor. I agree on the Assassin's Creed Shadows. I thought it was weird people making friction over characters. Exactly. Shout out to those two wonderful folks in the space. The last story before we get up out of here is, sadly, Sony has decided to close both Neon Koi and Firewalk Studios, maker of Concord. In a statement that came out from your boy, Herman Hulse, CEO of the studio business group at Sony Interactive, he says, and I'll read this out to everybody in chat and everybody listening in audio form. Again, thank you all for listening to the show. We are consistently evaluating our games portfolio and status as a part of our projects to ensure that we are meeting near and long-term business priorities. As a part of ongoing efforts to strengthen SIE's studio business, we have made the difficult decision to close Neon Koi and Firewalk Studios. With this refocus, Neon Koi will close and this mobile action game will not be moving forward. He wanted to express his gratitude to those folks. Regarding Firewalk, as announced in early September, certain aspects of Concord were exceptional, but others did not land with enough players, and as a result, we took the game offline. We have spent considerable time these past few months exploring our options, and after much thought, we've decided to sunset the studio. The first-person PvP shooter genre is a competitive space that's continuously evolving, and unfortunately, we did not hit our targets with this title. We'll take the lessons learned from Concord and continue to advance our live service capabilities to deliver future growth in this area. I know this isn't easy news to hear, particularly with colleagues and friends departing SIE, and both decisions were given thought and ultimately feel they are the right ones to strengthen our organization. I will just say, as a former employee of Firewalk Studios, Firewalk Studios was an amazing experience to be a part of. It was a thing that every day when I logged into work, I got a chance to see some of the smartest, most brilliant designers, people who you really do take for granted what we get a chance to play every day. You really take for granted the amount of work it takes to make the smallest thing possible in the games that we play. And we really take for granted the human toll that winds up happening for people who work at studios that get closed. And there's a segment of the gaming space and the gaming audience that cheers for closures. And there's a section of the gaming industry, the gaming community that cheers for people losing their jobs. And there's a section that really has no idea about what does it take to get a game from concept to on your system. These folks spent at least 5 years of their lives making a thing that they believed in. I was lucky enough to be a part of that process for a year or some change. And every day I was astounded by and learned so much from the people I got a chance to work with. There are so many dope things about the game development process that people really don't have the ability to understand because they don't work at a space like that. I'll end out on this conversation by saying massive love to all of my friends at Firewalk. I think you put out something that was really well done, even if it didn't find the audience that it wanted to find. I think even, and I know a lot of the conversations go up to management. And I think my time with the folks who managed Firewalk was really, really good. Again, everyone has different stories because people have been there for different reasons and different ways and stuff. But the CEO of Firewalk, he's a good dude from my experiences with him. He cared about players in a way that was very important. You know, shout out to Ryan Ellis, who was the creative director on that game. He cared a lot about the player experience and about what people were going to be able to find in that game. And there was a lot of stuff that never got shown that was really interesting and really fun and really brought something special to not only that genre, but what could have been really special as a way to showcase what live services could be coming out of the Sony Studio portfolio. And I'm sad that game never made it out into a way that really garnered an audience. I'm sad that that so many of my friends and some folks who I consider to be family no longer have jobs today. And I'm sad that there's a bunch of people who are feeling like this is a win for them today when it's not. What's going to happen is, again, and I said this many, many times over the past couple of weeks and the past couple of months, when you close studios for these reasons, and again, it's a business decision, right? Like they didn't get the numbers they wanted to, but the energy that was around that game that was BS, when we influence that and make that a part of the narrative of why games get closed and games shut down, and people run that narrative so much that it then becomes truth about a thing that was a lie, you wind up getting less studios that want to try new things. You get less games that are more interesting, and you get less people willing to stay in the gaming industry because now all of the folks who potentially had work are now out of work in a space where there are almost 30 to 40,000 people out of work. And a lot of people have been talking about pivoting out of the industry. You're bleeding talent when you do stuff like this. You bleed talent when you have people who are infinitely smart about the games that they make and are fantastic at what they do, and you wind up giving them the boot without any safety net or the ability to find another good pivot point for them to continue to stay in the industry. It is a sad, sad day that those two studios got closed, and especially Firewalk, which I think was doing something very, very cool and something very different in that space. Any last thoughts before I say my last final points about not this game, but something that happened this week? Cam, you're muted.
Yeah, so like it's terrible, right? It's terrible that these studios got closed down, and for me, in opinion, is like due to issues from Sony and like how that game was marketed, and from my POV, and like, but all your claims are like 100% true. No one should be celebrating studio closures. If Concord wasn't your jam, play something else. Like, that doesn't mean that you should be celebrating when people are losing their livelihoods. And it's really sad to see, because I do think that Concord had some was doing some interesting things, especially with its like storytelling and how they were going to do that as a live service game. And I'm very curious as to, there's been this whole discussion with Sony and PlayStation and how they were dealing with how they're kind of rerouting the whole live service strategy, and with this being their first attempt at that, so, like that was all them. That wasn't like them buying Bungie. This is not a good look, and it's the future of PlayStation on that side of things is very unstable and uncertain, and I'm very curious as to where things are going to go there. But very sad about the studio closures.
Yeah, I think the last thing about that is, I don't know how, if you're in a studio that now gets bought into the larger Sony ecosystem, that if you don't have a mega hit, do you automatically feel like Sony is going to give up on you? Like, that's a reasonable thing to say out loud. That's not me trying to troll. That's not me trying to start any fires. But like, as a person who works in the space and is seeing the developments of how this works, after that game didn't even get a month to live, that must feel like everything is on quicksand if you are a newer studio who has not really, garnered the grand, audience that a lot of people have found. That feels really not great if you're in that space. Go ahead, Cam.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment to make, and I would argue that it feels that way even if you are at one of the big studios. Like, we still see layoffs at Naughty Dog, right? We still see layoffs at the big studios as well. Obviously not to the extreme as this, and I do think that even though the Concord launch was like notably very bad when it comes to player count and things like that, I thought that Sony would give them a little bit more time. I do think the way, like, how quickly they reacted was partially surprising, but also not at the same time. And that's like mainly I guess it's just like, oh, if I was in those shoes and I thought about like being in that position, like top of the food chain in Sony, like I would not be surprised if they did decide to make a decision like that. But I think it was just the fact that they actually did it, when we've seen like other games that did like equal, if not maybe a little bit better as an online service game, like Marvel's Avengers, Anthem, like games like that I think are comparable into that sphere of live service titles that didn't work out. I was surprised that they actually switched so quickly to turn off the game and things like that. But yeah, it's in general, it's scary to have a job in the game industry, but especially if you're working first party Sony studio right now, like I would be even more so worried.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We're going to get up out of here for this episode of Spawn on Me. Thank you, everybody, for rocking. I have one more thing to share, but Cam, I'm going to give you the floor to let folks know where they can find more of your work. And if you have any other stuff that you're working on, any reviews or stuff that's coming up soon, let the folks at home know what you're working on.
I ain't got anything right now. I got something cooking, but it's still a little ways out. You probably won't hear anything about it for a while, but I do got something cooking, and that's a little Spawn on Me exclusive, I guess. But you can follow me on social medias, Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever, at Cam Final Mix. And yeah, just always happy to be here and chopping up with you, Kyle.
As always, fam, thank you so much for being here and rock with me on this episode of Spawn on Me. I have a couple of things that are in the mix. I will not be recording next week because I'll be away at a studio visit that we'll be talking about very, very soon. So make sure you're checking out all my work at Khalif Adams on Twitter /X. It's Khalif on Blue Sky and all the other places that you get a chance to check out the work that I do on the show. So please go make sure you're checking out more of Cam's work. Make sure you're checking out more of our work on the Spawn on Me podcast. And before we go, I do have some sad news. We lost a pioneer in the video game industry this week. I just heard this information a couple of hours ago and found out that one of the founders of Dynamic Focus, Aziza Brown, passed away this week. And it is a heart-wrenching find because people who do the work that she did, Dynamic Focus was and is one of the first and probably one of the first and only Black-owned, Black-run esports teams to ever be in the space. They started in 2016. And that's not recent. And Dynamic Focus and Aziza, who I met at many, many different events, was such a beautiful and amazing soul. She was extremely kind and really dope. She was a pillar of the fighting game community with the work that she did. And Dynamic Focus, was a team that, and it still is a team that continues to build a space for Black and Latinos and all of the folks who are in the spaces that we know don't get a lot of love in that side of the esports space. And to run a team that was well known, and to run a team that was given the credence and respect that it usually doesn't get when you are running one of those kinds of outfits. We got to give Aziza her flowers, and I'm sad that she's no longer with us. I'm sad that I never picked up the phone and got her on the show, because I think her story was a brilliant story, and she did a lot of work that didn't get paid for in terms of the credence and the flowers that she put in for, and she did in this industry. And she's a pioneer. And I hope that when we tell the history of the video game space, that her name is in those record books as a pioneer and as a person who did it first and as a person who did something very, very special. So we end on a sad note. Rest in peace, Aziza. Hope that we get a chance to see you soon, and hope that we get a chance to share more of your work, and hope that we get a chance to lift your name up in some good and positive ways. So until next week, please give the people in your life some love. Let them know that you're there for them. You never know when they might not be here. Election day is a couple days away. Please go vote if you haven't voted already. Get your ballots in. I've gotten mine in. Give people.
I have voted.
You voted as well. Cam voted as well. Yes. So please go vote. And until next week, we have more dopeness coming to you from Spawn on Me. Much love to you all. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you all very soon. Peace. All right, everybody. Word. Cam, thank you again, as always, fam, for rocking. You always are the best. Always bringing fantastic conversations and fantastic love to the space. Shout out to Ashley Lynch hanging out on X, watching us there. Shout out to Thirsty Panda. Shout out to Factorum. Shout out to all the dope folks who were here, who got a chance to rock with us tonight. Shout out to Greg Hazy. Shout out to OG TK. I hope you're feeling better, fam. Hope you're feeling better, and hope you're healing up. I know you did a bunch of stuff and your body was not doing right by you. Hope you're doing better and all that goodness. And shout out to everybody again who comes through and watches the show every week. It has been a fantastic, fantastic week. In fact, told him I had terrible times without you here. I had terrible times. I was supporting people. I was running off lane, and people suck. I don't know what to do with those people when I play Predecessor. I need you, brother. Anyway, have a wonderful rest of your week. I'm gonna go get some dinner and go watch this Mavs and Golden State game. Go Knicks. They had a really good game the other night. And again, we have some really good stuff coming very, very soon. Shout out to Silent Crow as well in the chat. And until next week, much love to you all. Have a wonderful week. Peace, y'all. Later. My team was feeding. They sucked. Anyway. Cam, thank you, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night.
All right, sounds good, Kyle. You have a good one.
You too. Everybody in chat, have a wonderful night. Get home safe. Please go trick-or-treat safely. If you find candy corn in your bag, throw it at somebody else. All right, y'all. Have a good night. Peace, peace. Deuces.
And I'll hit the ground running, chasing that rush, 'cause I feel